podcast, first of 2019. Not too sure when this will come out, but we're going to kind of keep it only semi-timely. And a couple of things have transpired recently. One, we saw Junior Dos Santos return to form, so to speak, over the last while, particularly UFC Wichita, finishing off Derek Lewis in a fantastically entertaining main event, quite frankly. We've also got Endeavour, parent company of the UFC, putting an end to its business relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, returning a $400 million or so investment, and Ari Emanuel walking around with bodyguards, slightly concerned that Saudi Arabian intelligence officials might actually murder him while he was in the kingdom, shutting that deal down.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. So those are two of the topics we're going to get to. Let's go with that one first. Did you expect Endeavour, formerly WME, who purchased the UFC for $4.2 billion a couple of years ago, to ever turn that kind of money down? And to put it in context, WWE, along with many other companies who have business interests in Saudi Arabia, who have business deals with the Saudi Arabian government, have said they're concerned. You essentially murdered a journalist in your embassy in Turkey. I believe it was Turkey. Yeah.
I think it might have been, yeah.
But none of them have actually, today, pulled out. I mean, the WWE is still going to go and do shows in Saudi Arabia. Are you surprised that Endeavour is the one who's actually sticking to their guns and saying, no, we're done with you?
Yes and no, I think. The WWE thing, their argument is how do you promote change by refusing to engage with that audience, that culture. There is a certain culture in the Middle East, right? So there is that argument to it. They also have 100 million reasons at least to keep going. So who knows how much if that is really what it is and not all the money.
Well, and that's a point, 100 million reasons, but then, Endeavour had 400 million reasons.
Yeah.
They're a bigger company overall than WWE is from a global perspective. But when you talk about changing the culture, is anything that WWE does going to change the culture in Saudi Arabia? Is going to make that culture a little more open, a little more receptive, a little more, accepting?
It's arguable that there is anything.
Because I feel like WWE is going to tone down their programming and bow to the wishes of Saudi Arabia, because they really have no choice, because we've seen what a strong-arm outfit that government is.
Well,
not that there's ever any question.
When they went, they didn't take any women. They had no women on the show, right? So they have the argument of, hey, you can't help, open things up and proceed with change, but they also went and they didn't take any of their female wrestlers with them, female stars. So
I want to commend the Endeavour, and again, we're talking about it because they're the parent company of the UFC, and this is the rare time. I mean, the UFC gets all kinds of grief for allowing someone like Ali, one of the biggest managers in the sport of MMA, to do business with them, given his ties to a Chechen dictator, for example.
Yeah.
In Ramzan Kadyrov, a guy who has basically committed a gay purge in Chechnya, who is behind killings. So this is the one time where they get one right, because realistically, to me, you're not changing the culture no matter what you do. I don't think anything in the UFC is going to change that culture, because really,
now,
what is it? It's a sport. It's entertainment. At the end of the day, what is going to change it is taking away their financial incentive. Is taking away their money. They hit them where it hurts. Hurt them in their wallet. Well, that might change the culture more than anything you can do in terms of putting on a performance.
In a way, isn't this an easy win, as it were, for WME UFC to make that decision?
Well,
it's $400 million, but is it really that big of a loss to them for something that could bring a lot of scrutiny and additional heartache to the...
Well, I want to be clear that it's not directly the UFC. This is more of an Endeavour at a higher level.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it is. And just the fact that Ari Emanuel is reportedly walking around there with bodyguards worrying that there might be physical retaliation, worrying that he could be killed. I mean, I don't know how serious, if he had any tip, or if he's just going on, this is a terrible regime who murders people, because it is.
Well, and that's... If that's the lengths you have to go to say, you know what, guys? We're deciding that we don't want to continue with this deal, and if you feel your life's a threat, you probably shouldn't be making deals with people like that.
No.
Right? If that is even a thing that comes up in the realm, and you're a big, legitimate business, and you're like, these guys could kill me, you shouldn't be doing business with people like that.
I think the absolutely blatant fashion in which that Khashoggi murder took place, the journalist who the Saudi officials murdered in the embassy, I think that was an eye-opener. I mean, everyone knew it was a sketchy regime. You didn't know how bad necessarily it was unless you paid close attention, and a lot of people don't. And that was an eye-opener. So you know what? I'm going to say, this is a plus for Endeavour. It's a shame they don't do it more and allow that to carry down to things like Kadyrov. Do you need, the Chechen fighters that are under his thumb in the UFC? Probably not.
Well, I look at it this way too. WME represents a lot of stars, right? A lot, and given that people are a lot more aware of social issues and things, I think for them it saves them as a company who does represent a lot of names to distance themselves from something like that, because eventually you could have these guys going, you know what? If you want to do business with a regime like this, I don't want you representing me, right? So $400 million, really, they probably make a lot more from the people they represent, and the thought of losing them probably outweighs the rest of it, right? There's a lot more ups than downs for them to be like, you know what, we're not going to continue with this deal. I think that's another part of it too, right? It's bigger than just the UFC portion.
Yeah, all right. Now, next topic on the this drive-in podcast, which again, we call it the drive-in because we're on our drive to work and we've got nothing better to do than talk about a bunch of this shit, is Junior Dos Santos. So what do you do in the heavyweight title picture with JDS? Cigano's got 3 wins in a row now. I believe that's Blagoy, Ivanov, Derek Lewis. I actually forget the third one at the moment. But, he's back on a win streak. He's a former champion. He had the fights against Kane, which we all said, wow, Kane's got his number. Those fights took a lot out of him. But he looks so good against everyone else. With some exceptions. I mean, obviously, the other problem is he also came up short against Miocic. But can you deny him a title shot? And you want to throw out the elephant in the room is Brock Lesnar, who is not deserving of a title shot from a sporting perspective. But on the flip side of that, the champion, Daniel Cormier, wants the fight, and he is deserving of a payday. So, what do you do with Junior Dos Santos at this point?
Well, we talked a little bit about that yesterday. And I'll come right out and say, I'm a JDS fan. I think he's a great guy. He's a good representation of the company if he is your champion. And I think going back to those Kane fights, I think Kane just kind of exposed the way or set the blueprint for how you beat JDS. You pressure him, you get close, you press him against the fence, and you work him. And I don't know why, but he would always allow himself to be in a situation that was more dangerous than it probably should have been for him against the fence. And that was exploited. There are fights I would like to see him in. I think him and Ngannou would be just like, as a fan, that would be just a super amazing fight. Hopefully it's not both of them just standing looking at each other. That could happen. That could happen. It's happened.
Has that ever happened before? Oh wait, Derek Lewis.
Right?
It certainly does check all the boxes as far as what you want in a heavyweight fight
on
as
paper.
A fan. Yeah. Now, who wins that fight? By the way.
Wow. You know what? I'd want to say Dos Santos is a more complete fighter, is what I would want to go with that. But at the end of the day, if Francis Ngannou hits you, the fight's over. Like, if he hits you and he lands clean, it's, heavyweights do that, but especially him.
Well, we're still waiting for Alistair Overeem to return from orbit.
Yes, right? And I've had this, we've talked about this before. As far as fighters in MMA who have, a lot of people have punching power, right? And then there's people who move the earth almost with the amount of power they have. Cyborg is one. I think it's like hitting someone with a baseball bat when she punches someone. Francis Ngannou, he's another one.
Derek Lewis is another one of those. But we saw JDS take a few good shots from him. They weren't 100% clean.
True.
They weren't his hardest shots, but
I feel if JDS fights DC, for me it's an easy call. Not easy, but more likely than not, I think Cormier takes that fight because Cormier, he's fought guys with crazy power, right? He's weathered the storm. He's a smart fighter. He's a wrestler, right? He's gonna close that distance. He's gonna get into it. He's gonna put Dos Santos in an uncomfortable position. That's how I feel. I feel like he is the perfect fighter that meshes against what JDS does, right? He's basically like a Cain Velasquez who's a little smaller.
Well, and the thing is, they trained together. Cain laid that blueprint down.
Exactly.
That having been said, if the Lesnar fight happens, I think you give JDS Ngannou, and I think that's a title eliminator, because we'd love to see Ngannou versus DC as well.
Yeah.
If Lesnar is not available, if he decides after WrestleMania, hey, I'm gonna keep doing the WWE thing, then I think it's JDS and DC. Regardless of the fact that, yes, I think DC wins that. Yes, I mean, he's trained with a guy who has JDS's number at this point, but now, on that subject, Cain Velasquez did not look good when he returned to UFC Phoenix. What do you do with him? Do you want to see him keep going? The guy's been injury prone, and his leg appeared to have buckled, and there's been a back and forth of whether or not that was serious and how bad it was, and if we should take anything away from that. But at this point, does Cain have anything left to prove if he's not prime Cain?
There's a lot to that, I think. Yes, Cain Velasquez throughout his career has had injury issues, a lot of injury issues. But when Cain Velasquez is 100%, he is as almost you could say he's as good as any fighter there is. For what he brings. Now the thing is, he was out for a long time, right? And there's going to be some rust. There's going to be uncertainty coming back. I think, even though he didn't look great and those things happened in that fight, I don't think you should immediately say, he's done. We've had conversation about that too. How we're, journalists and fans were very quick to say, this guy's fallen off of one fight. And I don't think that's exactly fair. I'd want to see him again, see what he looks like, and then maybe that'll give us a better idea of exactly where Cain Velasquez is. That being said, I think the number one thing is his health. He's had these issues. Who knows what his health is? Maybe he is having some issues and he's trying to fight through it. And at that weight class, with guys like that, it's so easy to move wrong, get in a wrong position, and get a major injury out of that. So I would want to see more before really saying where he is. That's my thought on it. I want to see more and then take it from there. And if it's a similar thing, then maybe you go, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't continue to fight it.
Listening to him speak before UFC Phoenix, the one thing that stood out to me was he had considered retirement. The question did come up. And that, one of the things he mentioned as well is that the timetable for his return had a lot to do with the financial side of things. The money was right. And that always concerns me. Fighters should make money. They should make good money. They should be getting paid more than they are. But I'm not always convinced that you should be getting in there just for the money.
No.
I think when you're at Cain's level, if you're not competitive and you're just going down to the octagon or the cage in whatever promotion you're with for the sake of a payday, there's a question of whether or not the damage is worth it.
Well, it's not, and I think too, if you're doing that strictly for a paycheck, from a mental perspective, you may not be all there. You may be in more danger of taking unnecessary damage, of getting injured, and shortening your career. And I think, the UFC, and who knows how much of that conversation went back and forth, and if he let on, I'm not quite ready, and if they said, well, you know what, we'll make it worth your while, or whatever. I think at that level, these guys are more than just a fighter. They're part of the branding. They're an ambassador of the sport, and they help carry that through to different continents and different countries. And I
almost want to clarify too. When Kane was talking about the timing having to do with money, it almost seemed like he was ready to come back a little sooner, but had waited. I'm not even sure that it was necessarily that he rushed back. It's that there was talk about him coming back in the fall, and we didn't see him until February. And he said, the financials had to be right. But again, you're right. If you're not 100% invested in the competitive angle of it, and I want to be the best, and you're just there for the paycheck, that's concerned. I don't necessarily think that is the case with Kane, but you never do know. Here's one out of left field, because this is coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to have 3 events in 3 days between 3 major promotions in Bellator, the UFC, and 1 championship. And the timing here is spectacular. Bellator is off in California doing a show for Paramount with Sadawad and Brandon Gertz. And the UFC is in Philadelphia with Justin Gaethje and Edson Barboza in what could potentially be another fight of the year. The man who is not there is Eddie Alvarez, a Philadelphia kid who wanted to fight in Philly when he was with the UFC, when he was UFC champion, and they never made it happen. Obviously, he fought Conor for his first title defense. That was in New York. He lost the belt. He did, however, have some other fights. I mean, Alvarez-Gaethje could have just as easily been in Philly. Alvarez-Poirier 2, his last fight in the UFC was in Calgary. Could have been in Philly. Instead, Eddie Alvarez is going to be in Tokyo, Japan, making his debut for 1 championship on a card with 4 title fights, and additionally the debut of Demetrius Johnson. So 1, did the UFC miss a huge opportunity not going to Philly with the Underground King? 2, are you going to get up early on a Sunday morning and watch that event live?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, hearing all that, how crazy is it that those guys are in 1? Like, if you went back, even 5 years ago, would anyone really have ever thought you would see Demetrius Johnson there?
No, Demetrius Johnson was the company guy.
Right? Like, it's crazy where things have gone. Where you are seeing, former core UFC guys going to other places, right? Bellator, that's not so surprising. But, going to 1, that's a big deal, I think. Is it something that would be worthwhile getting up for? I think there's you make a fair argument, you should probably get up and watch that just to see what these guys are doing over there. And the exposure, that's the one issue, though, when you have fights across the world, that, you may have to get up or stay up to see it. Totally worth it, though, I would say.
Now, one's got this deal with Turner where I think they're going to air some events on tape delay, and then, Bleacher Report Live has them. Since we're in Canada, we get this free on YouTube Live and on the 1 app. So, yeah. I mean, we can't lose because we're not going to have to pay for it. And if you sleep in a little, you can still go back and watch it on YouTube. So that's super cool. I don't know. I'm going to be in Philly that weekend for Cageside Press. So I'm going to be waking up Sunday morning and checking out of a hotel. I don't know how much of that I'm going to get to see. I will definitely be watching it as soon as I get a chance. One of the things I do wish, though, is that they hadn't have gone on the same weekend as a fairly major UFC card. I wish they had been able to secure a weekend with very little competition where they were the crown jewel. Because it's cool to go head-to-head, and they might... Actually, they do. They have the best card of the weekend. I will say, you've got Angela Lee trying for a second title. You've got Onglan Sung defending his title, his middleweight title, against Ken Hasegawa in a rematch of what was a Fight of the Year contender. You've got the lightweight title on the line as well. Shinya Aoki is competing for that against Edward Foliang. You've just got so many good fights on that card, plus the Grand Prix cards, or the Grand Prix fights with the debut of Demetrius Johnson and Eddie Alvarez. That is a crown jewel of the weekend. I just wish they could have stood out because it's in Japan. Those of us in the West, we're going to get swamped with the UFC coverage, and obviously we're a part of that.
We're part of the problem.
We might be part of the problem here, but I mean, there's a lot of MMA to go around. I do wish they had found a weekend where they could stand alone, but they might actually have the crown jewel. A lot of that's going to depend too, because what could happen here is Gaethje and Barboza go out and have a barn burner, the type of fight we all hope they have, and that's all anyone's going to be talking about.
That would be all anyone talks about, right? We've had this conversation before about, why is it that these organizations choose more frequently than not at this point to do events on the same weekend and compete with each other like that. I think if I was one, like you were saying, I would want to have the weekend to myself, be the only show in town, and say this is the biggest thing. Make sure as many people as possible are able to tune in and see. They may come to see Demetrius Johnson or Eddie Alvarez, but to see all the other things that they have to offer.
Well, this is part of the problem. There's only so many weekends in a year, right? You got 52 weekends in a year. Well, if you're doing 40 events, you're gonna butt heads. I just think for the bigger cards that would be nice. I also think that we need to get away from the idea of MMA as a weekend sport. We've started to see with the Contender Series and the PFL now moving to Thursdays on ESPN. And I think there is an argument to be made that could be beneficial for the sport too.
Well,
why are you always giving up?
It's like any other sport, right? Football. Well, football's generally weekends, but they do have Monday nights, and they do have other things.
They got Thursday nights.
But every other sport, they have events and games and stuff outside of the weekends. So I think it's a carryover from boxing, really, right? Because the boxing, yes, you would have fights throughout the week, but the big ones were always held for the weekend.
And that has a lot to do with the pay-per-view model. But if you're not doing a pay-per-view show, then you don't need to worry about that.
No.
And I hope the PFL does well on ESPN. Obviously, the Contender Series has done well enough that ESPN wanted it when they signed the UFC deal. So I want to see that. I want to see things spread out a little more and not give up a whole weekend. Because there's 3 major shows in 3 days, and I got to tell people, well, guys, sorry, see you next week. Because I got to cover it. And that might be being a little a little selfish because I cover the sport.
Well, and I think part of that too might have to do with the networks themselves, right? And I think because I might be wrong on this. It's been a while, but I remember hearing something along the lines of those live events. They do well on weekends because a lot of people are around for the weekends. It's more incentive for people to tune in and put on. If you're we're Fox, having it on the weekend. That's more incentive for people to actually tune in and get those commercial dollars.
How much of this is time, though? And we've seen, and this is the last topic that we're going to do for this podcast, ESPN era so far. What do you think of it? And this is how this is going to tie in. The timing of these shows, the runtime, the pacing seems so much better now that they are on ESPN and ESPN Plus, because these shows are not dragging out 6-7 hours and ending 1 in the morning. We've had shows end at like 10:30 on a Saturday night, and you're done. That's it. And it feels more like your normal sporting event, because the NHL can do a hockey game during the week because that game's not running till 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Whereas, MMA, you had things go so late, no one wanted to go see it during the week. If that pacing improves, well, first of all, what are your thoughts on the pacing?
You know my thoughts on the pacing. Especially at UFC, the event's so long. it starts 5-6 o'clock, and then you're there for 6-7 hours, start to finish. If you want to see all the fights, that's a lot. That's a lot for like a casual fan. And when we go to events, right, the venue is generally fairly empty up until the end of the night, right? You get to the main card and you see people start coming in, and you make a good point. How are you going to have an event during the week when you're not finishing until midnight or later, right? If you have to work the next day, you're going to stay up and watch that? Maybe, if it's something you really want to see, but generally that's not, I think for the product, I don't think that's that great. And when we spoke about PFL, the thing I really like about PFL is they don't really mess around. They go, and we're seeing fights, and they get through it pretty quick. And you don't have those lulls as a fan, and that's something else, right? If you're a casual fan and you were watching UFC on Fox, well, were you really sitting there watching them talk about the fight that was coming up for 5-10 minutes? Probably not. You're probably going to the bathroom, getting something to eat, grabbing a drink or something, or tuning to something else. So I think for the sport, people make the complaints about baseball, it's too long, right? Well, if you go to a UFC fight, well, you're in for a good 6 hours for that. So I think it's nothing but a plus. I think again that's probably carryover from some boxing stuff and kind of how things have kind of gotten bloated for the production, being on TV and having commercial time to fill and everything. I think moving away from that, we talked about this the other day, on ESPN, if they can streamline that, move it down a bit, and have it so you can be done by 10 o'clock. Well, if you can be done by 10 o'clock, you can have that fight any night of the week.
And there you go. That was my next question. So you definitely, if with the right pacing, you could move fights anywhere.
Yeah, and at that point, and part of the thing we've talked about too is it seems like there's always more and more events, and there's only so many weekends. Well, if you can start having an event, on a Monday or a Wednesday, and have it be smaller, I think that's nothing but a positive, and that's more exposure for the sport, right?
Well, I think the PFL second season on ESPN is going to be a good litmus test of that, because they're going on Thursdays, doing their first 3 shows in Long Island, their second 3 shows in Atlantic City. We're going to be down in some of those, no doubt.
Well, on PFL, I would say too, guys, if you haven't watched it, you should check it out, because I really enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
The tournament style, they have some really legit guys,
and just the point system too, where you're getting a win, but you're getting more. You're getting a better seed in the postseason if you get a finish. If you get a knockout. I
really, really like what they're doing. I'm happy to see them have that success, and we talked about this too. It's very easy, that they could have done one season, or maybe not even got through that season and been gone. And now they're getting support, and they're going to be on ESPN. That's fantastic. I think that's a great thing, and I try to tune into PFL whenever I can. And I think if you've never seen it, it's definitely worth your while to check it out, because it is different, but it's different in a good way.
Now, getting back to, we're not going to MMA on ESPN right now, but getting back to UFC and ESPN and what your thoughts are of that era so far. Trevor Whitman giving the coach's perspective on broadcast. What do you think of that?
We talked a little bit about that too. I think that's great. I like, there's going to be a transition, and I think we're starting to go there, where the commentating crew is going to be mixed up a bit, right? Goldie's gone. Joe Rogan's not doing every single event. I think as far as interest in what's happening, I like the perspective of the coach coming in and giving a little bit of that. And we see that in other sports too, right? I think hockey was doing that a little bit. They have former coaches. NFL does that as well, to have a perspective. And I think it's good where you have, a John Anik, right? You have a former fighter, whoever is, or a current fighter, whatever way they want to go with that, to get the fighter perspective. But I think that has another dimension when you can have a coach there to kind of give a perspective of, this is what's going on, because they for years they've been doing the corner camera and a little bit of the audio, but that's not always clear and not always gives the best perspective of what
your casual fan might not even understand what the coaches are saying.
Well, that's the other
why
thing too.
Someone like Trevor Whitman goes in and says, well, this is why he's saying what he's saying, and I do like that.
Yes, the why, as opposed to he's going out and saying, do a 2-2-3 or whatever. It's good to have someone be able to break that down a little further in real time and say, this is what they told him. They're saying this because this reason, right? And I think part of it too, and I think that's a good thing for your fan base, because if the people who are watching have a better understanding, they're going to probably be a little more invested in what's going on, at least to a set of those fans. I think I really liked it.
All right, well, there we have it. You know what? UFC on ESPN area so far, a vast improvement. Not that Fox was terrible. They brought the sport into the mainstream, or a little further into the mainstream, but ESPN has been a breath of fresh air. And we've got some fights to look forward to in the coming weeks. UFC London this weekend. UFC Philadelphia the following weekend. We'll be there. Bellator 218's coming up. You got Bellator 219 at the end of the month. And don't forget One Championship, a new era. Eddie Alvarez, Demetrius Johnson, 4 title fights. And, that's all for us. Give feedback in the comments and everything.
Thanks, guys.